I've been a rideshare driver in Asheville for over 5 years. I've driven through hurricanes, down abandoned roads, dealt with drunk passengers, and even got paid once in antique coins. I truly believed nothing could shock me anymore, but that night, that cursed night, changed how I see everything. And the worst part, I wasn't the only one affected by what happened. It was well past 2 a.m., and the sky looked like it was tearing apart. The rain hit my car roof so violently, it sounded like someone was hurling gravel from the clouds. The streets were drowning in water, and the windshield wipers struggled to keep up. Still, I parked near a shuttered convenience store downtown. That's where I usually wait when business slows during late shifts. The streets were dead silent. The only sound was the downpour and my own breathing. 15 minutes passed with 0 notifications. I was about to call it a night and head home when my phone vibrated. A ride request. The pickup location was 27 minutes away, with the drop-off even farther, heading out toward Maple Ridge. I normally avoid long-distance rides during storms like this, but something nudged me to accept. Maybe boredom, maybe desperation. I took the trip, flicked on the headlights, and started driving. With every block, the city faded into emptiness. It felt like the entire place had been evacuated. Only the storm remained. There was something eerie in the air, like the rain was washing away more than just dirt. As I kept going, street signs started disappearing. The GPS still worked, but it led me through routes I'd never seen, like it was guiding me outside the bounds of the familiar. By the time I hit mile marker 32, I was passing through a rural crossroad. No houses, no lampposts, no billboards, just blackness. My phone screen flickered, showing that I was 3 minutes away from the pickup point. I didn't know it then, but there was no turning back after that. Something in me shifted. I sat upright, swallowed hard, and braced myself. Because, even if it sounds dramatic, part of me already sensed that this night wouldn't be like any other. And if you're into stories like this one, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Trust me, what you're about to hear will stay with you for days. The GPS was taking me down a path I couldn't recall ever driving. I know Asheville and its surroundings like the back of my hand, but this direction led to gravel roads, far from anything resembling a town. The farther I drove, the fewer streetlights there were. Buildings vanished completely. On both sides of the road, I saw only rain-drenched trees and open fields. The storm rumbled around me, and the cracked pavement beneath my tires groaned with every turn. I started wondering who could possibly need a ride from a place like this at this hour. Someone stranded, an emergency, a prank. None of it added up, but something told me not to cancel. Maybe it was the stillness. The kind of stillness that begs for something to go wrong. And still, I drove forward, thinking this might just be another strange tale to share someday. I crossed a narrow concrete bridge wrapped in thick vegetation, and right as I reached the other side, the GPS said I was 500 feet away. I turned on my high beams, but saw absolutely nothing. No houses, no streetlights, no path. Just mud, branches, and blackness. I slowed the car down to a crawl and rolled toward the exact spot on the map. I shifted to neutral and stared ahead. The rain pounded so hard on the roof, it roared in my ears. I double-checked the screen. I was in the right place. I waited a minute. Nothing. 2 minutes. Still no one. I leaned toward the passenger window, trying to see if anyone was coming through the trees. Nothing. I grabbed my phone and texted the rider. "Hey, I'm here. Where are you?" Just as I hit send, something moved in the rearview mirror. A chill ran up my spine. I turned my head, and there he was, a man walking toward the car from behind. I hadn't seen him on the road. I didn't hear footsteps. A second ago, there was nothing, and now he was there. He didn't run, just walked steadily. He wore a dark raincoat, the hood hiding most of his face. When he reached the back door, he opened it and got in silently. The scent of soaked earth filled the cabin. I barely managed to say, "Are you..." Brian? He lifted his head just enough for our eyes to meet in the mirror. Yeah, you must be Chris, right? I nodded. He was my rider, but something about the way he spoke made it feel like I wasn't driving anymore, like he had taken over without touching the wheel. The first few minutes were filled with a silence so heavy I could hear the rain tapping against the roof, like clocks counting down to something. I glanced at him now and then in the mirror. Even with his hood still dripping, I could see his eyes locked, not on the road, not on his phone, but on me. The way he sat was off too. He picked the middle seat in the back row. Nobody does that unless they want to make you uncomfortable. The side seats were empty, more spacious, but he chose the spot directly behind me. Perfect angle to stare. Trying to break the tension, I asked, "Everything okay? Heavy rain out here, huh?" He didn't answer, just dropped his gaze briefly before locking eyes with me in the mirror again. I forced myself to look ahead, but I felt his stare pressing into the back of my neck like a needle. I considered asking again, but something held me back. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, a gut instinct. We drove miles in complete silence. By now, the road was pitch black. No street lamps, cell signal weakening. I started questioning why I ever accepted the trip, but turning back felt more dangerous than pushing forward. I wanted to check how much longer we had, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the road for more than a second. The rain was relentless. One wrong move could land us in a ditch. Still, in a quick glance, I checked my phone. Just under 20 minutes left. That's when I noticed something even stranger. He had no bag, no phone, not even a wallet in sight. His hands were flat on his thighs, still, unmoving. He wasn't looking out the window. Didn't react to curves or braking. It was like he didn't have a destination, like his only reason for being there was to be there, with me. "Heading home?" I asked, trying to sound casual. This time he moved his lips, barely audible, like a puppet slipping out of its human disguise for a second. "Not exactly," he whispered. I froze. That answer, vague, hollow, only raised more questions. I started thinking about pretending to pull over, blame a mechanical issue, anything to get out of this ride, but I knew any false move might trigger something worse. So I kept driving, with him behind me, watching, not knowing why, or what would happen next. And in that wordless tension I realized this wasn't just another ride. Something was deeply, irreversibly wrong. We continued along the secondary road, one that looked more like a scar across the landscape than a real path. The trees leaned with the weight of the wind. Rain kept pounding. The windshield could barely handle it, but the worst part wasn't outside. It was in the back seat. It wasn't just the silence. It was the kind that buzzes inside your chest. His presence felt suffocating. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. He barely breathed. I could feel his gaze glued to the back of my head, like he was trying to read my thoughts, or something much worse. I gripped the steering wheel tighter every time the car bounced over a pothole. My hands were damp, but not from the rain. It was sweat. My mouth was dry, and my stomach felt knotted. I tried to think of normal things. The route ahead, my shift tomorrow, maybe breakfast the next morning. Anything to distract me from the sense of being trapped, from sharing space with someone who simply didn't belong. Instinctively, I checked the rearview mirror again. He hadn't moved, still seated dead center in the back, hood hanging just low enough to cover his eyes. The only change, his hands were now clasped together, like he was praying, but it didn't feel like a gesture of faith. More like he was holding something back. The app said we were about 15 minutes away. The destination was a small ranch on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, but the route he asked me to take kept veering farther from the original path. I thought about bringing it up, but I hesitated. What if he didn't take it well? What if he didn't want us to reach the destination? Then, as if he had read my thoughts, he spoke, for the first time since getting in. "Ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you're alone?" His question froze me. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. His voice was low, coarse, and completely flat. It wasn't like he was talking to me. It felt like he was talking at something or someone only he could see. I didn't answer, just nodded slightly, hoping that would be enough to make him go quiet again. And it did, but it wasn't relief I felt. It was dread. I knew he was waiting for something. A reaction, a moment. The road began to narrow, and the mud made every turn slippery. I eased up on the gas, focused on keeping the car steady, but inside I was unraveling. Fear had its hands on the wheel now. I was just a passenger. That's when I knew something was about to happen, something I wouldn't be able to undo. The road changed beneath us. It wasn't cracked pavement anymore. It was soggy dirt, slick mud, and fallen branches weighed down by the storm. The app showed a turn ahead, a left onto a narrow trail leading into the rural edge of Pine Hollow. But just before we reached it, he spoke again. "No, not there. Turn here," he said, gesturing slightly toward a barely visible path cutting into the woods. It wasn't on the map. It didn't even look like a road, just a muddy track lit only by my headlights. I hesitated. "Are you sure? That route's not showing up on the app." "Yes," he answered. No hesitation, no reason, just final. The way he said it, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. My pulse spiked. This was one of those moments, one of those choice points. I felt trapped. If I refused, would he get aggressive? Was he carrying something? Would he hurt me? I took the path. The car groaned as it crunched over wet branches. Every few feet the tires slipped in the mud, and I had to fight the steering wheel to keep control. Visibility was near zero. The closed-in trees swallowed what little light the night had left to offer. We didn't speak, but his body had changed. Tenser now. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or something else. I got the sense he was waiting for me to let my guard down. Then I noticed him muttering, quiet under his breath. I couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a broken chant, thoughts looping over and over. I pretended not to hear it, but the repetition got to me, made it harder to focus. I considered stopping, telling him the car couldn't go on, that the road was too much. But before I could open my mouth, he gave another order. "Stop here." I eased on the brakes. The car slid a bit before settling. I looked around. Nothing. No lights, no houses, no hint that anyone lived within miles, just drenched trees and suffocating dark. "Here, you sure?" I asked, hoping he'd realize he was mistaken. He nodded slowly. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached toward the door. That's when he noticed my phone. It was still in the dash mount, app open, showing his name, his profile photo, the trip details, everything. He stared at it for a few seconds, then slowly pulled his hand back. That pause, that flicker of hesitation, changed everything. I didn't know what he had planned, but whatever it was, I'm convinced he was rethinking it. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us moved. My hands stayed locked on the wheel, feigning calm. He kept staring at the phone, like he'd just remembered something important. His eyes didn't show curiosity. They showed calculation, alarm. He had just realized his identity was logged. My heart thumped so loud I could barely hear the rain anymore. I knew one wrong word, one twitch, and this could spiral. So, without really thinking, I took a breath and said as calmly as I could, "Don't worry, I already cancelled the trip. You won't get charged." It was a lie. I hadn't cancelled anything. But it felt like the safest move. I wanted him to believe that his name, his picture, his route would vanish if he just walked away. He didn't reply, just bowed his head and pulled a phone from his coat pocket. Started scrolling. I saw his face faintly lit by the blue screen. He was thinking, weighing options, choosing. I had no idea if he had anything on him, a knife, a gun, or maybe just a bad intention that didn't need a weapon. That uncertainty kept me frozen. I didn't dare touch my phone, didn't dare move at all. After what felt like forever, he slowly raised his head, met my eyes in the mirror with a hollow, vacant look. Then, silently, he opened the door and stepped into the rain. He shut it gently, walked away without rush, into the woods, into nothing. The car's rear lights barely caught the outline of his silhouette fading between trees, and then he was gone, like he'd never been there. I stayed seated, hands glued to the wheel. I didn't move for at least a full minute. My legs were numb, my throat tight, my chest crushed under invisible weight. Then, without looking back, I started the car and got the hell out of there as fast as the mud would let me. The tires slipped, rain kept falling, but all that mattered was this: getting away from that path, from that man, from a decision I don't even know how I survived. I don't know what made him change his mind. Maybe it was seeing his name on the screen. Maybe he thought someone already knew he was with me. Or maybe he just found another target. One thing is certain, even after he left the car, the fear stayed with me. Driving back through that muddy trail was something I'll never forget. Every tree felt like it was watching. Every shadow between the rain seemed like it could be him, popping out again, blocking the road, knocking on my window. I drove without blinking, barely breathing. Just one thought repeating, "Get out alive." 10 excruciating minutes later, I finally made it back to the main road. The rain had eased, but the fear hadn't. Still, I didn't stop. I drove until I reached a gas station on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, only place open that late. I pulled under the awning, killed the engine, and took my first real breath in what felt like forever. The relief was fake. I shut my eyes, leaned back in the seat, and replayed everything that had just happened. His words, his silence, the moment he stared at my phone. What would have happened if he hadn't seen it? What was he planning? I unlocked my phone, opened the app and checked the trip history. There it was. Saul Vi, young guy, calm face in the profile photo. Nothing in that image reflected what I'd felt in his presence. I thought about reporting it right away, but I had no proof. What could I say? That he gave me weird vibes, that he wanted to get out in the middle of nowhere. I needed something concrete. So I did the one smart thing I think I did that night. I took a screenshot of everything, his full name, the route, the time. I also jotted down a quick note with the exact location where he got out, just in case. I drove home that morning in silence, no music, no thoughts. When I got there, I parked in the garage and went straight to bed, tried to sleep, but the quiet felt as heavy as the storm before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't done with me, and I was right. 3 days later, I got a call that turned my stomach. A police officer from Riverbend asked if I'd been driving Thursday night. I said yes, and before I could ask why, he hit me with the sentence that left me breathless. "We're investigating the disappearance of a young woman. She was last seen near the area where your final trip ended that night." He asked me to explain everything, every detail, and that's when it hit me. This guy wasn't just strange. He wasn't lost. He was hiding something, and I had been inches from being part of it. I didn't know what to say. The call shook me. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, a knot tightening in my chest. That man, Saul V, had stepped out exactly where that girl went missing 2 hours later. They didn't know his name, didn't know if he was involved, but I did. I knew right away. The officer asked me to come in and give a formal statement. I showed up the next morning with the screenshots and every detail I had. The detective who met me got straight to the point. "Anything you can tell us, no matter how small, might help." So I told him everything, from the ride request to the way Saul reacted to seeing his info on my phone. I described his voice, his stare, the route he insisted on. The officer wrote down every word, then asked me to mark the exact location where he had gotten out. Days passed. I heard nothing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Saul's image haunted me, walking into the woods, vanishing in the rain. What did he do after? Where did he go? Was he alone? Or was someone waiting for him? Every time I checked the local news, I searched for updates. Nothing. No developments. The girl was still missing, no leads, no trace. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Then I got a message from the detective. He wanted to ask a few more questions, this time over the phone. He told me they had reviewed surveillance footage from a small gas station near the highway, about 2 miles from where I dropped Saul off. There was footage of him walking alone in the area, taken hours before he got into my car. But after that, nothing. What he said next chilled me to my core. That same face appears in surveillance from other locations weeks before, different days, different times, always near that area. I asked if they were able to identify him through any other means. He told me the phone number was registered under a woman who had died 3 years ago. And the app account? It had been created only 3 days before our encounter. It was as if the entire profile had been fabricated, just to book that one ride, with me. I never heard back after that call. I figured they had nothing else. But I couldn't stop obsessing over it. Over every word, every pause from that night. And worst of all, the darkest thought that crept into my mind. Maybe that girl wasn't the first, and I could have been next. The following days felt like echoes of that night. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, sure someone was watching me from the hallway. I stopped working late shifts, and when I had no choice, I only accepted rides within the city limits of Asheville. I trusted no one. Every passenger's face started blending into the next. Any odd movement, any stare held too long, any vague address, they all set off alarms in my head. I'd become a jittery version of myself, like I was bracing for something to repeat, like he'd come back. Because deep down, that was what haunted me the most. The story hadn't ended. Saul had disappeared as easily as he had arrived. No one ever saw him again. No one ever mentioned him. The police gave no updates, not even a whisper in the local press. And that scared me more than if they'd found him. The complete absence of answers became a shadow that followed me. Then one night I was scrolling through my ride history in the app and noticed something that made my skin crawl. Saul wasn't the first strange passenger I'd picked up from that area. 2 weeks earlier, someone under a different name, with no profile photo, had requested a ride to a similar destination. The ride was short and uneventful, but now it came back to me clearly. That person had also sat dead center in the back seat, also wore a hood, also got out on a dark, empty stretch of road without saying much. What was going on out there? Who were these people? Were they the same person using different names, or part of something bigger, something more sinister? I felt this uncontrollable urge to go back to that place, to find something, anything that made sense. So I grabbed a flashlight, a fully charged phone and a metal bat, just in case, and retraced the exact route. The storm was gone, but the air still felt heavy, almost hostile. As I made my way through the muddy path, every part of me screamed to turn back, but I didn't. I reached the exact spot where Saul had gotten out. I killed the engine and stepped into the silence. The only sound was the wind threading through the trees. I walked a few feet, sweeping the flashlight side to side, searching for anything, a clue, a scrap of clothing, a forgotten object. And then I saw it, lying half buried in the brush, covered in mud and leaves, a phone. My hands trembled as I picked it up and shoved it into my pocket. I rushed back to the car and took off immediately. I had something, maybe the missing piece to everything that had happened that night. But what I found later was worse than anything I'd imagined. That same night back home, I carefully cleaned off the phone and tried to power it on. It was soaked and crusted in dry mud, but thankfully not totally wrecked. I plugged it in, waited, and against all odds, the screen lit up. No passcode, just a blank background. That alone felt off. Who doesn't lock their phone? It was like someone wanted it to be found, or had stopped caring if it was. I started going through the apps. No social media, no messages. But in the photo gallery, I found something, dozens of pictures. Too many, all taken in the dark. Photos from inside a car, pointing at homes, lit windows. Some even showed people, from a distance, getting out of cars, entering houses, unaware they were being watched. And then I saw the one that stopped my heart. It was my house, taken from the street, my living room window, lights on. I was sitting on the couch. Me, no doubt. I froze. There were more. A folder labeled T02 contained audio files, whispering, ambient sounds. One clip, though, had my voice, clear as day. I was on the phone with a friend, chatting casually. I didn't remember when it happened, but it was recent. Saul had been recording me. He'd been following me even before that ride. That phone wasn't just lost. It was a message, a warning. I called the police right away, handed over the phone, explained how I found it, what was on it, and told them again. I was sure Saul was involved in more than anyone suspected. 2 weeks passed before they contacted me again. What they told me changed everything. One of the photos on the phone showed a young woman entering a small store. When they enhanced and analyzed the image, they confirmed it was the missing girl. But what shook me most wasn't just that. The photo had been taken the same day I gave Saul that ride. There was no record of him anywhere else. His identity was fake. The rideshare account had been set up using forged documents. No one knew who he really was. The case is still open, but the officer told me something I'll never forget. If he hadn't gotten out of the car, you wouldn't be alive. And even now, trying to carry on with work, with my life, with these late-night drives, I've never been the same. Every face in the back seat is a question I can't answer. Every trip feels like it might be my last, because I learned something that night. Fear doesn't always scream or threaten. Sometimes it just rides quietly in the seat behind you.